You have to turn off your mute button.
Okay, is that working better?
Yeah, actually it is, so that's really ideal. Do you have me in the right position?
Yeah. Oh, I got to figure out where that is.
Well, I what I did before I got on this Zoom with you is I essentially went ahead and did a free meeting. I didn't see anywhere where the free version had the speaker's view. So I didn't see that. So, I mean, I watched that Zoom thing the other day. I sent you the instructions because I thought, okay, let's just see if we can learn one-on-one. So on my side, I'm smaller on top and you're larger, which is okay with me. But and I have all kinds of bright lights on, as you can see. I'm going to turn off the phone. So.
Yeah. See, I'm overexposed and I shouldn't be. I've been experimenting, but I think I'm okay now. But I can't find where to turn you on or off. They show on the screen near the top when you hover. It's just like when you hover over the bottom, you see the controls there. Sometimes there's something on the top and I can't see. Oh,
yeah,
wait a minute.
Normally on the side where it says gallery view. So on the very, very top on the right-hand side, when you're looking at the screen, it says view. And so I'm going to click on that. So I've clicked on mine where I'd say I'm the speaker. So I'm going to click off of that and see, did that change it on your side?
No, but I think I know where it is.
Okay.
If you go to your little picture on the side or mine, I can see, and it says mute, and it also says there's the three little dots. And with the three little dots, there's you rename it, you can stop the video, but it also says pin. And I think if you hit that pin, that's what's going to pin you. So I'm just going to try it and see. I'm going to pin you now. Okay. Now when I'm talking, you're there. Yes. So that's what the secret is. It's pin.
It's pin. Okay.
In the three little dots inside the small picture of the person you want to stay on the screen all the time.
Pin. Okay, so you want me to pin now, or have you already pinned me?
No, I pinned you, but you could presumably pin me so that you only see me and you never see yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm okay with seeing myself. So.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I've been seeing me for 70 years. So.
Yeah, well, you know what they say, as a beauty, I am not a great star. There are others more handsome by far. But my face, I don't mind it, for I'm behind it, so people in front get the jar.
Oh, beautiful. I love that. So I may save that and clip that and put that somewhere else, so. So I do have us on recording. You can see what that's recording. So I'm not going to touch that. We're going to leave that until later on.
Yeah,
that's how I messed up before. So there it is.
Okay. Now what I looked on in Zoom, and it said that for the free version, you're only limited to 40 minutes if you've got 3 or more people, or more than 3 people. So it sounded like you, me, and the doorpost could all be on here forever.
Well, it may sound like that, but when I try to schedule it for, say, like today, I tried to schedule another meeting from 12:30 until 1:15. The pop-up came up and it says for a free version, you're only allowed 40 minutes. So then when I changed it from 12:30 to 1:10, then they were okay with that. And then with the first time we met, remember how suddenly everything froze? I've never had that happen. You've never had that happen. So that was a new happening for both of us. But the bottom line is, I don't know whether they froze us because the 40 minutes was up. Whereas the last time I wasn't recording. So that may have been the reason why it went on and on and on and on and on, because we were over 40 minutes last time. So
when it froze, I mean, it took my computer.
I know.
I had to reboot, and it takes forever for my computer to reboot and put everything back in. So
Well, I'm so sorry about that. I'm sorry
no,
that happened.
don't
So
worry
I'm
about
just going to grab one thing just in case I need it. So I should have had that sitting in position before I started this, but there we go. Okay. So we're just gonna go ahead and get started. And you have me pinned.
yes.
So I'm good. Okay.
Just don't sit on it.
No, I promise you I won't. So.
Yeah.
No, and I really enjoy your sense of humor. I'm sure that's one of the things that's gotten you as far as you've gotten in life, because you constantly come up with something. I was so sorry I didn't get that thing you said last time about being in the front and being in the back or whatever it was. I
Yeah,
went,
well, we can do that because you don't have anything, do you?
no, I don't. I only had the
Okay.
first couple of minutes where we were struggling, for lack of a better way to describe it. And then I thought, darn, because I didn't even look into it until a couple of days later, and it was nowhere to be found. I even called the Apple people to see if they could find it where I couldn't, but no, it wasn't accessible. Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to do more or less what we did last time?
More or less, yeah. So
Yeah, you
um,
just go along and lead me with the questions,
I'm gonna do that.
and then I can go on, and then what we can do for the second one is to use the keys book,
Right. Okay.
and there's 6 keys, and
Actually, I'm gonna start kind of into the keys today. So I decided to switch out and we'll just do that. So just follow my lead. You don't mind if I lead, do you?
yeah, no, but the thing is, with this keys book, it'll take a good 15 minutes just
Yeah.
for the keys.
Right. Okay.
Want that, and of course we can go into more detail in different ones.
Okay.
I think I'm going to be trying not filibuster so that you can, like, I mean, there's 6 keys, so you can go along and say, okay, well, what's the next key, type of thing.
Yeah.
If we've said enough of it. But
Okay.
some of them, you can expand them whatever you
Right,
want.
I know that probably one key could maybe even be the whole 15 minutes. Just depends on which key it is, right?
Yeah, and as I say, I don't have to get through them all. We can do 3 keys today and 3 keys tomorrow. Who cares?
Yeah.
That idea. So
Yeah.
let's just have some fun, and I'll inject some humor if I can think of some.
I'm sure it'll come to top of mind for you. So welcome to Sound Advice, a hearing friendly business podcast, and welcome listeners. Today we have a special guest, Neil Bauman, PhD. He likes to be called Dr. Neil, and he is a hearing loss coping skills specialist. He's also a researcher. He's an author of multiple books in a couple of different areas, but he has a lot of books on hearing loss, which is our focus today. And he's also a speaker on issues pertaining to hearing loss. Dr. Neil is no stranger to the problems associated with hearing loss. He has successfully lived with a lifelong severe hereditary hearing loss himself. So I'm going to ask you, Dr. Neil, what kind of hearing loss do you have?
Well, I have the rarest kind of hearing loss you could have if you wanted to have one. It's what's called a reverse slope hearing loss, which means I do not hear low frequency sounds, but I can hear very high frequency sounds. In fact, sounds that are so high that most people can't hear them, and yet I hear them about 1,000 times better than a person with perfect hearing. And yet, standing face to face, 4 feet away, I can't hear them talking. So that's the rarest kind of hearing loss.
So it's kind of like sonic in a way, or what dogs have where they can hear that high pitched sound, right?
Yeah, when I was younger, because now that I'm an old goat, I've lost a lot of my high frequency hearing because of what they call presbycusis, which is just hearing loss with aging, which starts in the high frequency and takes them out. So in the last 10 years, I've lost an enormous amount of the hearing that I ever had. But when I was younger, I got myself a silent dog whistle, and I was standing in the house and the dog was sleeping on the ground outside. So I blew it, through the window, and right away his ears perked up. But boy, that hurt me. Oh,
Wow.
It's so shrill that it just gives you an instant headache.
Ooh, that doesn't sound like fun.
No, so you can have high frequency hearing, but it's not fun necessarily.
But you were able to hear women because women's voices are almost always in the high pitch range, right?
Well, they're a little higher than men's and an octave higher, but I'm talking like up at 15 or 20,000 hertz.
Wow.
Way up there. And I could hear, even today, after I've lost so much of my hearing, I can still hear up to about 15,000 hertz.
That's impressive. So can you give us a real life example of what 15 hertz would be? And I know that's a new question, but there we go.
15,000 hertz would just be a very high-pitched, thin whistle type of sound.
So whistle.
If you can remember back when you were young and charming, not that you're not still charming, but remember the old TVs, and you could hear the flyback transformer, it made a whine, and you could hear that. People, once they get over 25 or so, no longer hear that. And
Okay, well,
I could hear those kind of very high pitched sounds. In fact, you know, I could walk down the sidewalk and I could tell every house as we went by it, I could tell whether their TV was on because I could hear that high pitched whine outside on the sidewalk, and yet I couldn't hear them. And yet when I would go into the house, if I visited somebody, I would have to put my ear something like this close to the speaker before I could even tell they had the sound on.
wow. So closer than 4 feet. So more like 12 inches, you know, so that's what it looked like.
Well,
So do you wear cochlear implants or hearing aids now?
I have hearing aids. I wear
Okay.
hearing aids occasionally. I'm supposed to wear them all the time, but because of my kind of hearing loss, and hearing aids just can't be fit to cover what I need. Like yesterday, I was doing the dishes and I had my hearing aids on because there's somebody going to be coming to the door. And just the dishes in the sink and cutlery just touching them, it was so loud, it was hurting. So I had to take my hearing aids off just so I can do it. So that's why.
Yeah. So I know before you've told me a joke that some people have heard and some people haven't heard, but there is a story around a woman cooking dinner at the kitchen, you know, in the kitchen. So we're on kitchen topic now. And then her husband came up behind her. What was that story again?
Well, that's a cool one. That was to show how people hearing loss sneaks up on people without them really being aware of it. Some people, of course, they lose their hearing overnight, but other people it's just gradual. And so it was a story about Harry and Betty. Now, Harry knew that his wife was losing her hearing, and Betty, she was very adamant it was not her. She could hear fine. And Harry knew he was wrong because she just didn't hear him. So he went to the doctor and he said, "Doc, what can I do to prove to my wife that she's losing her hearing and needs to get it attended to?" And the doctor said, "Well, stand some distance behind her and ask her a question. If she answers it, you know she's hearing. And if she doesn't, move closer until she does answer. And you'll know how bad her hearing is." So Harry came home and his wife was standing at the sink getting the supper ready. So he stood back in the living room and he called out, "Honey, what's for supper?" And as he knew, there was no answer. So he went and stood in the dining room and called again, "Honey, what's for supper?" Still no answer. So he moved closer and stood in the kitchen doorway. And for the third time, he said, "Honey, what's for supper?" And when there was no answer, he was shocked. I mean, he knew his wife's hearing was bad. He just didn't realize it was that bad. So then he went and stood right behind her, came up and stood right behind her and said, "Honey, what's for supper?" And turning around, she said, "Spaghetti and meatballs," I said, for the fourth time.
So that same principle could also be applied if you have a newborn or a little toddler or anybody else. You simply can go behind them and simply say something and see whether they respond or not. Because I do know a little girl who is now an extremely successful adult, but when she was younger, somehow or another, they missed Dr. Marion Down's newborn screening test. And the optician is the one that paid the price for that one, who also went to the same school. Their kids went to the same school. So it's kind of a touchy situation. But apparently it took her, both of her parents were attorneys, and it took them until 2 years to decide on whether to do a cochlear implant or not. But because this child needed one, but at the same time, if they had done something so simple as walked behind the individual and said, whatever you want to say, honey, is dinner ready yet? Or would you like some candy in the case of a child, or would you like to go to the movies or TV or whatever?
Or like my dad did. My parents didn't know I had the hearing loss. I'm sitting on the floor in the kitchen playing with my toys. And my dad, remember, he didn't know, but he just happened to be behind me. And he said he was going to go out in the car. And he said, do you want to go for a drive? And I ignored him. And I mean, you don't ignore. I mean, this was a 29 Buick in those days. And I loved going in a car. And my dad knew that. And so when I didn't respond, then he said, do you want some ice cream? Well, ice cream was a real treat for us. And so, yeah, I wanted it, but I didn't respond. I was just playing with my toys. And that's when they decided maybe I couldn't hear. Yeah. But you see, the thing was, I was so good at lip reading that they had not noticed that. I was almost 4 at the time. And I still lip read today. I've been lip reading every day of my life. In fact, I tell people that my first language is speech reading.
Speech reading. So what's the difference between lip reading and speech reading?
Well, lip reading is a subset of speech reading. Lip reading is just looking at a person's lips. Okay. Speech reading is watching everything about the person. So you're watching their lips and their tongue, their jaw, their facial expressions, their eyes,
body language,
anything. If I could see your toes, I could see if you were tapping your toes because you were anxious to get away from me or whatever.
Right.
But I found something that is really interesting. A lot of speech readers are the same. We can't speech read a person if they're wearing sunglasses.
Oh.
Take your glasses off so I can hear you.
I never heard that one. That one's a brand new one. So I know you wrote a book called The Keys for Success. What's the name of that book again?
It's called Keys for Success. Oops, let's try and get it.
There we go.
Yeah. Keys to Successfully Living with Your Hearing Loss.
And that will be in show notes, but can you share with us maybe a couple of those tips out of your book?
Well, there's 6 of them, the keys. And the whole idea of that book is that we think you lose hearing, what do? How do you successfully live with it? And so these tips, the first one is, and most people never would think of it, but in order to successfully live with your hearing loss, first you've got to psychologically adjust to being a hard of hearing person. Most people don't think of that. And so included in that psychological adjustment is grieving for your hearing loss. And if you lose your hearing rather fast, it's just like losing a spouse. It's a shock to the system, and you've got to go through the grieving process. And so I wrote a little book called Grieving for Your Hearing Loss, The Rocky Road from Denial to Acceptance. And it goes through these 5 stages that Kubler-Ross way back had written about for losing a person in death. And the same principles apply. So it's like denial is the first step. If you, first thing, if somebody says, the doctor says you've lost your hearing, the first thing you do is you deny it, because you've got to give your mind a chance to sort of grasp it. And so the first thing out of your mouth is, no, that can't be true, or it's just temporary, you see. So the denial comes first. And then when you can no longer deny it, then you start going into the other stages, and you can go through them in different orders. But a lot of times what happens is you deny it, then comes anger. That can't be right. Somebody caused it. you know, it was your fault, you yelled in my ear, or whatever. I mean, some of these things are so, you wouldn't expect it. Like there's a professor in New York, and he teaches hearing loss. And a lady had come to him because her child had kissed her right on the ear and used such suction that the sound essentially was like a gunshot, and she
Wow.
lost her hearing. And so he wrote an article called "The Kiss of Death."
The kiss of death. Well, I'll have to Google him, because I haven't heard of this one yet. So that's something
And
else.
I've had numbers of people, because I wrote an article about Levy and this called "The Kiss of Death."
The kiss of
So you
death.
can find an article on my website.
And
But
what is your website?
It's hearinglosshelp.com.
Hearingloss.help.com, right?
Oh, not dot.
No, okay.
Hearinglosshelp.com.
Okay,
And
hearing loss help.
make sure you get the HELP, because I've noticed there's numbers of people that supposedly have normal hearing, and they put it down as hearinglosthealth.com.
Okay, well,
Got to get the help.
well, you know that when somebody even has a mild hearing loss, they're missing some of their vowels and consonants.
Consonants, not
And
vowels.
yeah, so I mean, so even people that have a mild hearing loss that may not be wearing hearing aids may have this issue. One question, just to pop off of your book for just a moment, but what do you use for assistive listening for, like right now? I see where you have a headset over your head, whereas I have earbuds inside of mine. So what do you use to help you be able to hear with your hearing loss in this situation or in other situations, say when you go out in public, when you go to the library or you go to a movie or anything along that line?
Well, I have a whole raft of things that I use. Like on my desk right now, I've gotten numbers of different things that I use. I'm wearing headphones. I could wear earbuds, except that the earbuds with the mic in them won't fit on my amplifier. You see, I can't hear my computer. It's not loud enough. Sometimes when I put my ear close, I can just tell it's on. There's sound there, but I can't understand it. So I have a powerful amplifier that I plugged into the earphone jack on my computer, and these headphones go into it.
And
So
what is the name of your headphones?
well, headphones are nothing.
Oh, headphones, just regular headphones. And
Yeah.
okay, just thought I'd ask. Okay.
The thing that I'm using is called the speech adjustatone. And it's a 6-band equalizer, and it's got enormous power. If I turned it wide open, you'd watch the headphones just go boing. If I only had one on, you'd watch both eardrums going that way.
So it's pretty
That's-
loud. It's just like when the young people go to a concert and they stand in front of those boom boxes. A lot of them are not cognitively aware that they can blow out their hearing, nor when they go into, say, a restroom, that has a hand dryers where you put your hands underneath
They're
it.
loud.
They've been tested as loud as 120 decibels. And they can even blow out babies' hearing because babies hear starting at 16 weeks, So we've talked about grief with getting hearing loss. And I do know a little bit about Kubler-Ross. So thanks for bringing that up, because anytime you lose something, in fact, even right now going through the pandemic, a lot of people are going through a lot of adjustments. So that might be something, if you've got a hearing loss or if you want a direct path for grieving, then perhaps you can get Dr. Neal's book on this particular topic. I'm sure he covers it in detail. I'm looking at him on a Zoom call right now as we're doing the podcast, and I see all kinds of books behind there. And I know he's writing a couple of books as well now too. So what would be a number 2 tip in reference to if you're successfully living with hearing loss, or a key?
Okay, well, so if we've gone through the grieving process and that's all done, then the next step, what I call key number 2, is learning how to deal with your hearing loss the right way. And most people don't realize this, but most hard of hearing people use what should I call bad coping strategies. And the reason for it is really interesting, is because we are emotional beings. And so we look for emotional solutions rather than, let's call them practical or real solutions. So for example, say I'm not hearing you. Well, and so I ask you to speak up, and you speak up for the proverbial 7 seconds, and then you forget about it and you drop your voice, because we speak with our voices running on autopilot.
Right.
And so we just have a standard level that we speak at. And so we forget, especially if you're a speaker and you're talking to a group, you're thinking about what you've got to say next. You're not thinking about that person, you forget. So you ask me again. You put your hand up, let's say we're in a class or something. Sir, I can't hear you. I'd say, sorry. And I speak up for another 7 seconds, and then it drops down. Now, what are you going to do next? 7 seconds later, you can't hear. Are you going to put your hand up a third time? You see, you're starting to get embarrassed. You're feeling emotional. It's the emotions that are driving you. And so you don't want to call attention to yourself. And so from then on, you just give up and sit there and glassy-eyed stare, and that's it. You don't know what's going on. Whereas a better way is to find a practical solution. What one guy did is he had what looked like a table tennis paddle, and on one side he had really big bold letters, "Please speak up." And then on the other side, he had "Thank you." And so
That's creative.
So he would tell the speaker beforehand. He said, "I can't hear. I need you to speak up or speak slower." You can have different messages. Slow down or speak clearer or whatever. But what he would do is he'd say to the speaker, "Now, I know that you have a regular speaking voice, and you'll forget about me. So would it be okay if I just went along and held my paddle up when I miss something, so that you remember to speak louder or clearer or slower or whatever?" And then when he does, he just goes along and flips it to the "thank you" and then puts it down. But you see, that draws attention to yourself, especially if you're like me, that's always sitting very near the front. Everybody in the room sees me with this paddle going up, wonders what's going on, and you could be self-conscious. And so we have to learn how to not run on our emotions, but run on what actually works.
So be more assertive then.
Well, that is another thing. Well, you've got to, because if you're passive, because you can only deal with your hearing loss, we'll call it, in 3 ways, 3 basic ways. The first one is to be passive. You just sit back and you won't even say to the speaker, "Sir, I can't hear you," but you're sure hoping that somebody else is going to do that. That's passive. And you just sit there quietly and miss everything. In other words, you put your needs of everybody else ahead of your own.
Right.
And then there's the opposite to the passive person, is the aggressive person. And they are the one that jumps up, "Hey, you idiot, speak up, I can't hear." And they may not be nice about it, but they put their needs ahead of everybody else's. And that's just as wrong. And sometimes passive people will take it for a long time, and then all of a sudden they've held it in, then they just blow up, and then they're aggressive, and you don't want that. What you want is to be assertive, where you put your needs and everybody else's needs at the same level, and then the two of you have to work together to mutually come up with a way that will meet both sets of needs. And that's what we...
Yeah, one of the things that I've used in the past is what I call the 5-finger method, and so if I need a speaker, and I've done the same thing, I have actually, on my website, there is a reserved seating sign. So before I go to a conference, I let them know that I'm hard of hearing or hearing impaired. And that's another topic that we can talk about.
We can't talk about hearing impaired. No, I got to tell you about this one.
Okay, go ahead.
The definition of a hearing impaired person is a person who was caught drunk driving and had normal hearing. That's hearing impaired. We are hard of hearing because hearing is hard. We struggle to understand. So I love the term hard of hearing, but the politically correct one, of course, is a person with hearing loss.
Well, actually, in the HR world, so in the working world, they still use hard of hearing. So that in the United States, that's still that classification. With the 5-finger method, you simply raise your thumb to let the speaker know they need to go up or they need to go down. So even if you're on a 1-to-1, and then, the sign language thing, I tell them I'm going to say thank you in this way to let them know that that they're doing a good job. And equally so, if somebody's talking too fast, I can't often understand them. So I simply go like this to let them know that I'm a cop. I'm a hearing cop. I'm going to let them know that they need to slow it down so that I can catch what they're saying. And I do agree that it needs to be where we kind of work together. And the medical, I know the deaf, and my own aunt is deaf, but I know the deaf really despise the word hearing impaired. If they really dislike that. I've had some of the younger generation recently tell me, well, hard of hearing sounds so old, old fashioned. And I'm like, well, okay, but that's still the legal definition. And I love your way of explaining it. So that was new for me. So thank you for that. I know that term was created back in 1969 with the ADA law. So I know that's where it came from. Because that's how the definition that the deaf gave those of us who have a mild to profound hearing loss. So that's how that was classified. But equally so, I would like to come up with a new term, which is totally out in left field somewhere, but it's hearific and terrific, to try to empower people with hearing loss, because in the medical field, if you've got anything that's not working well, it's classified as impaired, so that's one of the things I have struggled with, because I don't really like the word hearing impaired either. So I like your thing about it's a hearing person that is not driving well. So what's your number 3 clue or tip or key?
Okay. The third key, we just moving on. I got to keep them in the order that they've got them in the book here, and then we can after we've got the emotionally we're squared away for hearing loss and we're doing things right. Then the third one that I use is to use all the simple and free hearing loss coping strategies. And like the simplest one is get close to the person. If you're standing 10 feet from me and talking to me, I'm not hearing a sound from your voice. I'm just going to be lip reading you. If you want to get close, then I've got so much better chance. And the reason for that, there's a really good reason, is most of the intelligibility of speech is in the high frequencies. But most people that have a hearing loss in the high frequencies. So they don't hear the high frequency components of speech. Therefore, it just sounds like mumbo jumbo. As you get closer, the speech gets clearer and clearer. And if you talk right to my ear, especially my right ear, because that's my better ear, if you put your mouth this close to my ear, I will hear you beautifully, in spite of having, almost a profound hearing loss, because you're close. So the first thing you do is you get close. Another one is you face the person, because if you're not facing them, I can't lip read you. Like, it's interesting for me. I don't want you to talk into my ear, although that's where I would hear the best, because I can't lip read you. Right. I got to get you back here so that I can lip read you at the same time, because my brain puts what I see and what I hear together.
Right.
And so I got a good little story in one of my speech reading classes. Andy, he was a farmer, and he was just going out the back door of the kitchen. His little grandson was 5 years old. He said, "Grandpa, can I come with you?" He was just going to do chores around the
Right.
farm. And his mother said, now, you know that Grandpa can't hear. Remember, you've got to look at him before you talk to him. And so here's little Evan staring at Andy's rapidly disappearing back going out the door. And he says, but Mommy, I am looking at him. Yeah, they forgot, face to face.
Yeah, face to face. Yeah. And usually lighting on the face. So I know a lot of people, you know, the numbers have gone down luckily, but a lot of people are in the hospital environment right now. And we, you know, we do have the mask on, but when all that is gone again, then it's better to have the doctor not with their back to the window, because it seems like a lot of them for some reason have the desire to stand next to the window, where a hard of hearing person or a lip reader can't read their lips
The face
with their
goes
back to the
black.
window.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
the
So they
face
need to
goes
be,
black, and
yeah.
I had trouble. I'll tell you a little story. Grade 3.
Okay.
My grade 3 teacher was a little lady and a thin lady, and in those days, schoolrooms had windows all along one side. I sat in row 3, so if she was along the window side, I'm looking there, and that was south, and so the sun would be backlighting her, and her face would be black. And I didn't know in those days, you know, how to articulate this is a problem. I just knew that that's the way it was. And in the winter, the hot air registers were right up to the bottom of the windows. And being a thin person, I think she got a little cold in the winter. She used to stand there with her bum on the register. Well, that's fine, but I couldn't understand her because the light was against me, and I have to be with my back to the light.
Right.
And that way, the light, if I'm facing the person, the light is on their face, and I can see them, and they don't have to see me because they got good hearing. Now, if you have too hard of hearing people, what you do is you stand at right angles so that you've got a half a face that's lit and a half a face that's darker. But at least you see that way, both of them, that would be assertive coping. You're doing the best for both.